you again. You've chosen to take this beautiful Saturday to be here with us. You must care about school food. And the way I do, I just want to say briefly, Lindsey and I started this group a year ago, the two of us, and we had shared sensibilities. And thank you. And this group has now grown to over 800 supporters and parents in 109 schools. So we have a true grass movement effort here. And we have had some successes so far. Transparency and communication are two of our first issues, and there has been an improvement in that. There is now some information on the school menu about the a la carte items. We're very happy about that, so thank you, Marla. And we've also identified a few products that violate the guidelines, and they were removed from the school, so that was also very sort of enabling. The other thing is we push for a trial of healthier vending at one middle school, and that's currently underway. And then also, the last thing that we're really proud of is that the school board agreed to delay turning on the vending machines at the end of the school day by 30 minutes. So that's what we've done. Now, for the future, we're going to continue to work at the higher levels, trying to maybe influence some legislation and try to talk to our local school board members and help them see things the way we do. And thirdly, most importantly, is to build our base of parents in the schools. And that is really where the cultural change is going to happen with the kids and the parents and the way they eat at home and the way they eat, the way they cook. And so it's a big cultural shift that we're really looking for. And it's working. I would say that just communicating with other parents is really a great way to do that. So thank you again for coming, and wanted to also thank Gordon for planting the first seed that has become the School Food Forum. It was really his idea. So thank you, Gordon. And just to say on a more general note, we're hoping that this forum will move the conversation forward beyond the stalemate between it must improve and it costs too much. Cost is often an excuse for not innovating, but we hope to demonstrate that there are ways to improve school food and thrive financially. And other school systems our size have done it, and there is not one quick fix. So this is our school system, these are our kids, this is our community, and as a community, we all need to work together on this. Thank you.
How's everyone doing this morning? Good. My name is Gordon Clark. I'm the project director of Montgomery Victory Gardens, an organization which is devoted to building more sustainable and healthy Montgomery County, primarily by teaching more people how to grow food, connecting them to local farmers, and also advocating for sound food policy at the county, state, and federal level. To advance these goals, Montgomery Victory Gardens took the lead in the campaign to get a new MCPS policy to allow vegetable gardens on school property, which I'm delighted to say was enacted in 2011. I was equally delighted to hear about the formation of Real Food for Kids Montgomery, a group which I feel a very great kinship with, and was delighted to meet Karen and Lindsey last fall. And when they asked if MVG would like to organize a school food forum with them, it was a mutual idea. I didn't want to get all completely blamed for it, but thank you. When they asked if we wanted to co-organize this, it was, as I was told 1,000 times when I worked on the school garden issues, it was a no-brainer. Of course we want to do this. MVG is proud to work with Real Food for Kids to bring you this really important event. By way of introduction to it, I just want to I want to share with you 3 things that I learned while I was doing many hours of research and preparation for the event today. Number 1, virtually everyone you speak to cares about this issue and wants to see our kids getting the healthiest, freshest, best food available. parents and non-parents alike. It doesn't make a difference. Everyone cares about this issue. And we're certainly thrilled that so many of the elected leaders in Montgomery County share that interest and enthusiasm with us, joined us on our host committee, and are in fact here today. And I just want to recognize those, and if you want to raise your hand, Bonnie Cullison is here today from the 19th District, Delegate Cullison, pardon me. Council Member Florine, Nancy Florine, you're here, thank you. Delegate Tom Hucker, there you go, Tom. Make up for my rude mention of you earlier. Vice President of the MCPS Board of Education, Phil Kaufman is here today. Phil? Craig Rice, Council Member Craig Rice is here. I can't read that. Bring it up. Delegate Jeff Waldstreicher is here. Jeff, thank you. Senator Brian Feldman is here today. Alice Wilkerson, Chief of Staff for Senator Jamie Raskin. Alice, you're here today. Thank you. I know Mara Parker from Mark Elrich, Councilmember Elrich's office is here, and Mark will be joining us later. It shouldn't be. And Sarah Rosen, who is with U.S. Representative Chris Van Hollen's office, is here today. And I'll introduce you in a moment. So thank you all for being here. So that's the first thing I learned. Everyone cares about this. The second thing I learned is I would not take Marla Caplon's job on a bet. Marla Caplon is the Food Services Director for Montgomery County Public Schools. I couldn't do it. Even after you get by the astounding logistics of feeding tens of thousands of kids a day, of dealing with staff and parents and administrators, you have to work around the sort of fundamental injustice of feeding kids in the public school system in the U.S., which is that food systems, unlike any other part of public education, are required to pay for themselves, which can make for a very daunting challenge. So I really, we are honored. I want to thank her and say that we are honored that Marla is here today with us to talk about creating a vision for fresh and real food in Montgomery County Public Schools. Please give a warm round of applause for Marla, as you'll have another chance in a moment. And lastly, I want to say that in spite of these huge obstacles, big positive changes are happening in school food programs all over the country. We know, for instance, that Los Angeles School District has banned soda in their schools and that they no longer serve flavored milk. So we wonder, could we possibly get rid of sodas in MCPS schools or stop serving some of the flavored milks here, which are in fact very high sugar content and sort of chemically laden, but we'll talk about that more later. We know that a group called Growing Power in Wisconsin is making a nutrient-dense kale and pea shoot salad that is being marketed to schools all over the state of Wisconsin. And we wonder, because we know how good salad bars are for kids eating more vegetables, is it possible that we could do better than having a salad bar in only 1 out of every 10 schools in Montgomery County? We think we can do better. We certainly know that in school districts from Baltimore to Memphis and around the country, there are school districts that have close relationships with farms, in some cases actually own farms that provide fresh produce to them. And again, we have to wonder, in a county that has the second largest agricultural reserve in the country, could we do something like that? We think it's possible. So these tantalizing, profoundly exciting possibilities are what bring us all together here today to hear about them from distinguished local and national experts, and we really, frankly, have got one of the best days of speakers you can imagine on this issue, to discuss them and to come together to see how we can, in Montgomery County, provide the best, freshest, most healthy food possible for our kids. To say, as Jamie Raskin said in his welcome note, which is in your program brochure, to make the school menu as important as the school curriculum, which I think is great words to live by. So thank you all for being here today. And then my last duty for the moment, it's wonderful as an introducer to introduce someone who needs no introduction. She has been a champion of school food programs, of any type of programs for feeding food to kids that need it. She was, close to my heart, a champion of the community garden program in Montgomery County, with which I'm intimately involved. I'm sure anyone who cares about food in Montgomery County knows her. Please give a warm welcome to Council Member Valerie Ervin.
Good morning. I'm usually not dressed like this, but on my way out of here, I'm going to go host a basketball tournament in downtown Silver Spring called The Audacity of Hoops. This is my t-shirt. So we have upwards of about 18 teams that are going to play a double elimination tournament. So I squeezed in some time because there's nothing more important to me in my work as a policymaker than making sure kids have healthy food. Before I get started, I think we missed mentioning someone. Jennifer is here from Councilmember Hans Reamer's office, so we want to make sure. So it's good to be in a room full of revolutionaries, and it takes one to know one. And as Che Guevara once said, revolutionaries are guided by great feelings of love. And we're all here because we love what we're working toward, and that is to make sure every single child in Montgomery County receives meals that are wholesome and healthy and that the food is sustainable. So we've been working very hard for a long time. I really want to take this opportunity to thank Gordon for all that he's doing, Lindsey, Parsons, and so many people in this room who have taken on this challenge and taken it to heart. But let me just say one thing. There are people missing in this room today, and they are the parents of the kids who are on free and reduced meals. And almost 34%. And what challenges me every day that I get up is that we have to speak on behalf of so many children who have no people speaking on their behalf. So for those children, the food that they receive every day are usually the only healthy meals they're going to receive during the day and throughout the week. And so all of us here, we care so much about our own children, but as we see poverty growing around us in Montgomery County, we really need to underscore the importance of making sure those families are seen and heard, and those children are seen and heard as well. So, in 2009, the first thing I did when I joined the county council, the very first thing that we did was we worked with the school system and others to make sure that we had a summer food program. Marla and I were there from the very beginning, and what happened was in MCPS there were very few schools during the summer months that provided meals. Now we're up to 114 schools, I believe, that provide summer meals for children throughout the county. This was a huge deal. And for those children, we don't know where they get food during the summer. We think there's a lot of hunger that goes unnoticed in Montgomery County. So that was my first foray into school food. And in 2009, I joined with the Parks Department to install the first community gardens in Montgomery County. And as Gordon can tell you, we're just starting to see the fruits of that labor, and we hope to continue to grow that. And I'm really proud to announce, and you've probably already heard this, that Montgomery County is the first county in the nation to establish a food recovery network. And I want to thank my colleagues who are here, Craig Rice and Nancy Florine, and all of the Montgomery County Council members who saw this as a no-brainer. We just got on it. We got this work done in 10 months, and so come January, we will be doing an implementation of the Food Recovery Network, which will streamline the process for collecting edible food, which would otherwise go into the waste stream, and distribute it to nonprofit providers who serve the hungry. And so, as a policymaker, this is a wonderful day. I wish I could be here to hear all the speakers, but let me just say that my hero is going to be here this afternoon, the cafeteria man. I hear he's no longer in Baltimore. There he is. I have been following you for a long time. If he could do what he did in Baltimore City, imagine what we could do here in Montgomery County. So thank you. I hear you're in New Orleans now. Memphis, and they need you there too. So we need to find our own cafeteria man and get this work done, because we have the wherewithal to do what needs to be done to feed kids healthy food and keep our work as revolutionaries on the front burner. So thanks for having me today, and have a great rest of your day.
I'm Lindsey Parsons, and I am the co-director of Real Food for Kids Montgomery, and let me add my welcome to those of the others. This event has been long in the planning, and I'm really excited to see you all here. We're very happy to have interpreters for Spanish-speaking people. Los intérpretes están en el rincón izquierdo, si están buscando dónde ir. If all of the speakers could be conscious of speaking more slowly so that the interpreters have time to interpret. Thank you to all of our sponsors. My apologies to Sandy, Jordan, and James Billy, whose names were inadvertently left off of the list of individual sponsors. We appreciate your support. And thank you to all the legislators who signed on to our honorary host committee to show their support for our missions. I also got late notice from Congressman John Delaney, who also wanted to add his support. Y quería darles la bienvenida a nuestros amigos hispanohablantes. Estoy muy contenta de que ustedes hayan venido y que hayamos podido encontrar intérpretes para ustedes. Espero que el programa de hoy sea útil y educativo para ustedes, y que en el futuro, con su ayuda, nosotras, las integrantes de Real Food for Kids Montgomery y Montgomery Victory Gardens, podamos llegar a más miembros de la comunidad hispanohablante. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to our next speaker, Marla Caplon. Marla is the director of the Division of Food and Nutrition Services for the Montgomery County Public Schools. Marla has a Bachelor of Science in Foods and Nutrition from the University of Maryland, and she has devoted her career to eliminating childhood hunger and promoting health and wellness. And she's currently an active board member and past chair for MANA, Montgomery County's food bank. Karen and I have been meeting with and emailing Marla for about a year now. And Gordon even longer than that, and we're really glad that she agreed to come and speak at the forum. We're looking forward to hearing what her plans are for the future of the food in MCPS, especially with regard to the new central facility that is slated to be built, and hope that our program today will get her to consider some things that maybe she wasn't already planning on. We are currently collaborating with Marla on a trial of a la carte and vending items at Takoma Park Middle School that are free from artificial colors and flavorings, are low in sugar or high in fiber, or otherwise healthier than typical a la carte snacks. And Marla has also been working with us to bring greater transparency regarding the a la carte foods that are sold in the schools. Marla has the very challenging job of feeding about 55,000 kids a day, many of whom do not have a healthy diet at home, and I know that she, like us, wants what's best for our children. So please join me in welcoming Marla Caplon.
Thank you, Lindsey. Good morning. It is my pleasure to be here. To be here today. Can everybody hear me? It is my pleasure to be here today. And I do welcome the opportunity to address questions, as my goal is for everyone here to walk away with a deeper understanding of the school meals program in Montgomery County. I'd like to first begin a little bit about myself. I am a product of the Montgomery County Public Schools. No, I didn't graduate last year, but I am a proud graduate of the Montgomery County Public Schools. And yes, I have seen changes around the county throughout the years. I am a registered dietitian, and I've worked with the Division of Food and Nutrition Services for 25 years. I should say 25 wonderful years. And during the past 25 years, I've been fortunate to develop relationships with school staff and with school principals, and I've worked tirelessly to accommodate the needs of our students. I really do understand the culture in each one of our schools. And I've always, and my passion has been, to eliminate childhood hunger. I love what I do, and there really truly isn't anything that I wouldn't do to help a child. Oh, I don't have to start over, do I? Okay. Okay. As Gordon said earlier, I do believe that we have a common goal: to provide the best for our children. With that said, I was asked to talk about past, present, and future of school meals in Montgomery County, so let's go. The transformation of cooking kitchens, and I know that that's been a question amongst lots of our parents in recent years. That transformation of cooking kitchens in the elementary schools began in the 1970s. Certainly, at the time, savings in labor costs were an issue, but more importantly, standardization of food was realized. Meals were assembled and delivered to all of our elementary schools from 5 central kitchens throughout the county. And by the way, to sort of tie into Ms. Ervin, at that time, our free and reduced percentage was less than 10%. Also to tie into Ms. Ervin, she said that our free and reduced numbers are almost 34%. I got the official numbers yesterday because it was November the 1st, and our official numbers starting this year are 34.1%. It's the highest it's ever been in our county. What did the meals look like back then? USDA guidelines were a little bit different. I'm just stating the facts. Whole milk was a requirement, so we had to provide whole milk to students. The nutrients that we focused on were iron, cholesterol, vitamin A, vitamin C, and the meal, the protein, fat, and carbohydrate was 20% protein, 30% fat, and 50% carbohydrate. A little different. We did have a computer, one, that allowed us to do nutritional analysis, and of course, even at that time, we were in compliance. In the late 1980s, we began our dream to formulate our current facility, our central production facility. We really did design a state-of-the-art facility. It's still one of the few facilities, and my colleague will talk about his later, but it's one of the few facilities in operation east of the Mississippi. This is where we prepare soups and sauces and dressings and homemade entrees that are continuing to be served in the elementary and secondary schools. Just an FYI, Montgomery County Public Schools food service is the 16th largest in the nation. Our production facility also allows us to maintain strict sanitary standards and food safety standards, as well as standard products throughout the MCPS system. I brought it with me, but it's at the table. The prepackaged container that you see in the elementary schools, thank you, Tony. Tony's holding them up. Those are prepared, the meals for the elementary schools are prepared in our facility. We have 2 assembly lines. For those of you that remember the I Love Lucy episode, that's what we have in our production facility, and that's where meals for the following day's service to our elementary schools are prepared. The taco meat, the marinara sauce, the macaroni and cheese, all of those things are freshly made, and we're continually reformulating our recipes so they're lower in fat and lower in sodium. And then many of them, for instance, our broccoli and cheese soup, that the amount of broccoli in the soup actually equals a half a cup to meet the half a cup requirements. So as Gordon said earlier, we try and make what we do kind of easy looking, but there's a whole lot of stuff going on in the back. In the early 1990s, we made the decision to have fresh fruit available at all serving lines for breakfast and for lunch. Whole milk, thank goodness, went away, and manufacturers began the production of whole grain products. Back in the 80s, it was not heard of for manufacturers to prepare those kinds of products for the school meals program. Even though we really didn't fry in the secondary school, the only product were French fries. New school construction, we no longer installed fryers. Instead, we installed an oven that introduces steam, so when you bake a fry, it sort of tastes moist like a fried product. And then for existing schools, on a rotating basis, we removed fryers and implemented these new ovens. Our meals continue to become healthier. With the collaboration with manufacturers and the development of whole grain products, right now, almost 95% of our grains are whole grain. This development takes time. 1, for the development of the product, and 2, for student acceptance. Anecdotally, I'll tell you a true story. Several years ago, we tried a whole grain hot dog roll that was brown, and
the students would not accept it. And we stood hard and firm and we said they will. And they stood hard and firm and they said they wouldn't. And at the end of the year, they didn't. So we have now found a roll that's whole grain, but it's white, and the students are accepting it. So student acceptance, and I know it's an issue of conversation for us, but it's vitally important. All of our menus continue to offer fresh fruits and vegetables. The elementary school menu offers an entree salad weekly, and there are salad bars as part of the meal program, plentiful around the county. Just an FYI, all of our schools received the Healthy U.S. Challenge Award, both in 2007 and 2010. And that award speaks to menu as well as the tie-in to physical activity. The percentage of students receiving free and reduced price meals in June was 35.1%. This means, and now to start the year is 34.1%. This means that more than 1 out of every 3 children in our county is eligible for free and reduced price meals. So to tie that into menu planning is tough. There are 162 countries in our county and 131 languages. The elementary menu has 3 choices a day. One is always meatless. There are a lot of children in our population that don't eat meat. Then we drill down a little bit further. Some of those elementary schools serve a peanut butter and jelly sandwich as the 3rd choice. Some of those can't because of the number of allergies in those schools. So instead, we serve a whole grain, a grilled cheese sandwich on whole grain at those schools. And then in the secondary schools, we have 7 entrees a day, always an entree salad and always a meatless option. How do we accommodate special needs or special diets? We do that too. As large as MCPS is, with over 151,000 children, we address the needs of 1 child. As a registered dietitian and staff in my office, we go to schools and meet with the nurse, meet with parents, meet with the child, include the cafeteria manager. So a child with allergies or special needs or a medical issue can eat every day if they wish to. We also recently began in 2 of our middle schools a line that has gluten-free foods because there's a population in 2 of those schools that has requested because there's a need. We have vegan choices also available. We serve hummus, we serve beans, so there's another part of our population that needs to be accommodated. In our menu planning, we have to consider a lot of factors. The menu has to meet USDA regulations, and we do that. Just an aside from that, we are really regulated, but what we try and do in our schools is make it look as homey and home-like as possible. That's tough for our staff because they are absolutely regulated to have to do what they have to do in terms of portion sizes and what students have to take, but we're trying to make it look like this is a vanilla place for them to visit during the day. Consideration, as I mentioned, has to be given to the various ethnicities and various cultures. We have USDA commodities that need to be utilized. And yes, cost is a factor. But most important is student acceptability. I can't say that enough times. We conduct food testings. We conduct student focus groups. And it gives us the opportunity to gain insight into what students really want to see on the menu and what kinds of foods would excite them. Recently, we have tried in 3 schools, two middle schools and a high school, a burrito bar that, you know, we hate to try and mimic fast food, but Chipotle is the place to go these days. And so we've tried and it was successful. We saw kids excited about make your own. They're not making it, we're making it, but they're selecting what they want along a line that's all healthy, but they're able to have what they see outside. So we're trying to be innovative and create some of those bars. Our target in meal planning right now is less than 30% fat and less than 10% saturated fat. As part of the Healthy Hunger Free Act of 2010, students now have to take a half a cup of fruit or vegetable as part of their meal in order for the meal to be reimbursable, and I'll explain that in a second. I think that's wonderful. Talk about the tie-in to food costs. Our food costs soared last year with the increase in fruits and vegetables, but it increased for the right reason. So that's fine and that's okay. Sodium and fiber, and of course the focus on minimum calories as well as maximum calories is a target. As I said, we're always looking for new products. And yes, we are gradually trying to reduce the use of processed foods. Many of you may know, last year we introduced a baked, unbreaded chicken breast that had a bone in it, something that I'm sure is familiar in all of your homes. The kids didn't like it. We kept trying. The kids wouldn't take it. It wasn't a product that they wanted. So this year we're trying a kind of a drumstick. Maybe that'll be something that interests the students. But we're constantly looking for less processed items. But when you think back to what Ms. Ervin said, when more than 1 out of 3 students in our system is depending on school meals for their main source of daily nourishment, we have to make sure that we're providing food items that these children will eat. By the way, in case you don't know this, many of our students don't just receive breakfast and lunch. We provide suppers in about 60 of our schools to children at the end of the day. As long as they're tied to an academic program, they're able to get supper, because we don't know if there's anything to eat in their homes after they leave and after they've eaten lunch. We also, as Ms. Ervin said, and this is my passion, is the summer meals program. We have moved forward so much in this program. And I know that it probably doesn't speak to a lot of you, but last year we served over 10,000 children in our county every single day. And knowing that some of these children aren't tied to camps or programs or summer school, we have walk-in locations throughout the county that any child 18 years of age or younger can come and get a meal. So 10,000 children isn't even the 50,000 that are eligible for free and reduced price meals. So we know we have more to work on in that arena as well. Again, I mentioned cost as it relates to menu planning. Cost is a factor, but again, it's not the determining factor. As Gordon said, we don't receive funds from this county. And I don't want to harp on cost, but I think it's important to understand our structure. How we operate, how we exist is reimbursement from meals that are served to our students. So for every meal that's served, and that means, again, the regulatory piece, a student at lunchtime has to take 3 things. He doesn't have to take everything, but he has to take 3 things. So to translate that, if a free eligible student only wanted milk, he'd have to pay for that milk. So what our cashiers do is they say, sweetheart, go back and get 2 more things, because he has to have 3 things. Now he has to have fruit or vegetable. So if that child comes through the serving line and has a hamburger on a bun and a milk, the cashier says, sweetheart, you need to go get a fruit or vegetable. And that's what they do when everybody's a mother to a child in our cafeterias. So when the reimbursable meal is served, we claim that for reimbursement. What does that look like? For a child who is a full paid child, in the elementary school, that child pays $2.50. Secondary school, he pays $2.75. We get 36 cents back from the federal government. That's what we get. And you can do the math. For a reduced eligible child, that child pays 40 cents. We get $2.61 back. For a free child, the child pays nothing, and we get $3.01 back from the federal government. It costs about $4 to deliver a meal to a child. So how do we do it? We have other programs, such as the after-school supper program, the after-school snack program, the MMFA breakfast program, our a la carte program, which we'll talk about in a minute, our a la carte program, and our catering that helps to fund those other the service of breakfast and lunch. By the way, that includes, the reimbursement includes the cost of our staff, the cost of the food. Everything in our program is based on the reimbursement that we get back from the federal government. That's it. And happy to tell you that we are in the black and we're doing very well. But that is our funding structure. So, what do we have to do? And I'm sure Tony will talk about this later. We take advantage of every grant we can. We had 2 grants last year, which we used those funds to provide fruit and vegetable bars in middle schools and elementary schools. We apply for every single school we can to be part of the in-classroom breakfast program. We call it Maryland Meals for Achievement. We apply for every school that can be part of the fresh fruit and vegetable program, which is a program from USDA that's not tied to a meal, that it's a kind of a manna from heaven. It's a fruit that's served mid-morning to all the students in a school. So we take advantage of every possible opportunity to bring benefits to our children. Basically, that's the meal program. Now that you've gotten the 25-cent overview, let's talk about snacks. Just to share, we have had a wellness policy and regulation here in Montgomery County since 2006. By the way, we did that voluntarily. That was before wellness regulations were mandated. We did this because we wanted to align what's sold outside of the school meals program nutritionally with the nutritional regulations of the school meals program. So what does that mean? It means that there are nutritional guidelines in place for any food or beverage that's sold to students between midnight tonight, if today was a school day, and it was the end of the school day. And before the school year started this year, I contacted our vendor. Before there was any discussion, I contacted our vendor because of the new Smart Snacks regulations that came out of USDA in June. I contacted our vendor and said, we want to align ourselves with what's coming next year. We want to extend to 30 minutes after the end of the school day. Because you know what? If it's the right thing to do, that's what we want to do. So what does that mean? Well, it means that any item that, I've been given the 2-minute warning. It means that any item is single serving, it must be less than 200 calories. I mean, it really is, if you're a label reader, I'm gonna start talking fast. It really is, for a snack, it's a healthy snack. And I know that there's a lot of emphasis that's been given to like the baked chips that we use, but there's other things that are sold. We sell bagels, we sell yogurt, we sell fresh fruit. We sell a lot of items to students as an a la carte. And I really would like to put the issue of transparency to rest. The only reason that we can't publish the entire list on our website is it would be misleading, because every school has, and we're really focusing on elementary now, every school can sell or does sell different products. They're all vended through us, but for whatever reason, and many reasons, there isn't one school that has the same list of items that are available. So for that reason, the menu and the website indicate that parents, if they want to know specifically what's being sold at their school, contact this cafeteria manager. And there is a way to restrict the student's account. And we've been doing that for years. So please recognize that I am totally transparent, and the heart of our division is really, truly in the right place. So if there are questions, I will certainly take them. And then my next is, where are we going from here? Well, our plot of land, we've been evicted. We've been good neighbors, but the land that we're on is being reconstructed for residential and commercial, so we have the fun of being moved about 5 miles up the road in East Montgomery Village area. But what that does is it gives us the opportunity to plan a new facility. So this is fabulous, and what's that going to look like is there's going to be a lot more space dedicated to fresh fruit and vegetable processing. So what we're hoping to do is to prepackage kid-friendly size fruits, grapes, strawberries, cut up oranges. We currently have sliced apples. be able to make more salads from our production facility to the elementary schools. In the secondary schools, they make their own. So this will give us some more opportunity to move towards a greater amount of fresh fruits and vegetables. Also, we've dedicated space for raw meat and different areas for different types of meat, for the thawing of meat, so that we can do more preparation, homemade kinds of entree items for service to our students. So it's an incredible venture that we're about to embark upon, but I think in the long run, it's going to give us the ability to continue to provide healthier meals for our children. And again, I can't say it enough, I'm happy to be here, and my interests and the interests of my division are to continue this conversation and to continue to collaborate with interested groups like you and to always look for finding ways to make our meals healthier. So thank you very much.
Our next two speakers are Shivani Narasimhan and Lisa Lefferts. Shivani, or Dr. Narasimhan, received her degree from Hahnemann University School of Medicine in Philadelphia. And she then completed her internship and residency, followed by a 2-year fellowship in endocrinology at George Washington University. Dr. Narasimhan is board certified in endocrinology, metabolism, and internal medicine. And in case you're wondering why we invited an endocrinologist, the answer is that, among other things, endocrinologists are the doctors that diagnose and treat diabetes. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Narasimhan.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, and thank you so much, Ms. Parsons, for inviting me to speak. I'm honored. I have 2 young kids myself, ages 8 and 6, and we're in Howard County. But before Howard County, we lived in Montgomery County, and this is a wonderful area. I certainly learned a lot from Ms. Caplon's talk, and it was encouraging to know all these great things are going on behind the scenes, and it encourages me to look into my community to see what they're doing. Hopefully it's just as well as you are in Montgomery County. So to very loosely paraphrase Shakespeare, it's about what to eat or not to eat, not just to eat or not to eat. So this, and in the interest of time, I think the graphics are quite self-explanatory, so hopefully I won't take up too much time. And this I thought was a nice evolution of man, of adult man. And it's more so actually, not from childhood to adulthood, it's more so from the 1960s to the 2000s. And the heavy toll of diet-related chronic diseases, certainly the big one now worldwide, not just in the US, is diabetes. And I'll discuss a little bit about the 2 different types of diabetes because that's usually a question that's often asked. About a little over a third of the population have cardiovascular disease, and cardiovascular disease includes things such as high cholesterol, type 2 adult diabetes, so I'll talk about that, blood pressure, weight status, physical inactivity, and tobacco use. High blood pressure, to break that down, is more stroke, and it's the 2 different types of stroke, a block or a burst approach. And that has to do with high blood pressure that can rupture an artery or actually cholesterol that blocks an artery. And again, about a third of the population have suffered a stroke. Heart disease, congestive heart failure, kidney disease, and renal failure leading to dialysis. Dietary factors that contribute to high blood pressure, again, have to do with high sodium, high salt, high cholesterol diet, which often leads to obesity, as well as excess alcohol intake. To talk a little bit more about diabetes, about 11% of the population have diabetes. Keep in mind that that's just the diagnosed population. There's plenty of people who are not quite yet diagnosed with diabetes, and you might say, well, if they're not diagnosed, how do you know they have it? Because there's a category called pre-diabetes, which is just something going to lead to worsening diabetes if it's not treated. So officially, only 11% of the population have diabetes, but triple that amount actually have pre-diabetes. like I mentioned, 35% of the population have the prediabetes. So both of those add up to nearly half of all Americans that have sugar problems. And those sugar problems lead to chronic illnesses. Majority of them are suffering from type 2 diabetes, which is related to weight, most often, but not always. The two different types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 was traditionally juvenile, and it still is. And that's an immune attack on the pancreas, which results in insulin deficiency. Thus, insulin dependence from the day of diagnosis. Type 2 was traditionally called adult onset. Unfortunately, we are diagnosing type 2 adult onset in children as young as 8 years of age, and that is simply due to obesity. What happens there is that the higher the weight, the higher the blood sugar, thus increased risk of type 2 diabetes, which can be treated with pills but often requires insulin shots, because the higher the sugar, the higher the demand from the pancreas to make insulin, and after a while the pancreas burns out. There's actually something called beta cell burnout. Beta cells are the pancreatic cells that make insulin. And when you have beta cell burnout, you are dependent on insulin. So plenty of type 2 diabetics who were treated with pills most often will eventually require insulin because of beta cell burnout. That beta cell burnout can be improved with weight loss and recovery of your own beta cell ability to make insulin. But the key thing here really is that the adult onset type 2 diabetes is now being diagnosed in children because of weight. It is worsening faster in children than it does in adults. So that beta cell burnout happens faster in children than in adults. So children who are diagnosed at a very young age in elementary or middle school would likely be on insulin before the age of 18. If type 2 is diagnosed in a child, they will need to go on insulin sooner than an adult diagnosed with type 2. And the criteria, if you're curious about what your blood tests have been, the way we diagnose it is checking a fasting glucose that's greater than 126, a random glucose anytime during the day that's over 200, or a sugar average, the A1C, that's greater than or equal to 6.5. A lot of times with diabetes, either the doctor will ask you or you can ask the doctor, what's my A1C? Especially before you even referred to a specialist, so you know that's your sugar average grade. People without diabetes have an A1C in the mid-5 range. Well-controlled diabetes is in the 6 to 6.5 range. Certain populations, particularly the elderly, can have an A1C near 7. Above 7, you're talking about uncontrolled sugars. And the diagnosis for prediabetes is up there as well, with the fasting glucose being between 100 and 125, and the A1C between 5.5 to 6.5. Here's a graphic of the American children in the 1960s versus some now. Here's another graphic. It's quite self-explanatory, and I wanted to get the picture of the plates in because that's actually a lot of the portion problem we're having now, is there has been an increase in average of 600 calories per day, mainly in added fats, not natural fats, added sugars, and added oils, a lot of them processed. To lose 1 pound per week, we need a deficit of 500 calories per day. Those 500 calories can be in the form of diet, exercise, or both. So at the end of the week, you will lose 1 pound if you've dropped 3,500 calories in a day. You can see if an average increase of 600 calories per day, people are gaining a pound a week. And I see that. I see people within 3 months have gained 10 pounds, the next 3 months have gained 10 pounds, and I view their graphic now because of electronic records. We can view their graphic weight, graph it out their weight for the last 2 years since we've been on electronic records, and it's really disconcerting to see about an average of about 5 pounds every visit, 5 pound gain every visit. And that's because the average dinner plate in the 1960s used to be 9 inches, and now it's 12. So there's been about a 30% increase in portion size, and there's actually been an exact 30 to 33% in the average weight of American people, children or adults, and it has directly linked with the portion size. Again, about 1970s to 2009. obesity in America then and now. The 2 to 5-year-old population obesity actually has doubled, unfortunately, but the greatest increase has been in elementary children. Ages 6 to 11 were about 4% overweight or obese, and now that number has multiplied by 5. The 12 to 19-year-old age was 6%, and that has tripled to 18%, as has a little over a doubling of the adult population. Most habits do start young, and that's why we're here, and hopefully this will change not just what's happening in Montgomery County, but reflect what's happening throughout the U.S. We think, the choice is easy, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to choose vegetables over donuts? However, you can see the pricing really does deter, and that goes to some of the other earlier speakers who mentioned about the cost of good food. When a burger costs 99 cents and a salad costs 5 times that, that's pretty deterring. I'll interject a short story. A few years ago, I was taking a road trip, and my cousin at that time was about 15, and she said, "Oh, Auntie, can you?" I went into the stop station, the rest station, and she said, "Oh, can you get me a McDonald's apple pie?" So I said, "Okay, fine." So I stop, and I said, I just want one apple pie, and the server said, "Well, you get 2 for 99 cents." And I said, "But I just want one." And she actually just stared at me for a few minutes, thinking I was crazy. And she said, "But you get 2 for 99 cents. She said, "I can't charge you 50 cents. I said, "Oh, I'm not expecting that. You can keep the other one. I just want one." And I'm thinking, of course, if somebody says you get 2, they say, "Sure, why not?" And nobody's going to throw that second one away. So that has to do with that, cost. You get, do you want fries with that? Do you want a larger fry with that? So it's unfortunate. For another few cents of popcorn, you can get triple the size of popcorn and triple the problem. And here's another reason why salad costs more than a Big Mac, because you can see on the right side of the screen the federal nutrition recommendations for fruits and vegetables. But you can see that the subsidy is right at the tip. On the left side of the graph, that's how much fruits and vegetables are subsidized, only 0.3%. So again, costing more. And they're also more perishable. You can freeze chicken, fish, meat, as well as some vegetables, but they're not as perishable as fruits and vegetables are. So again, raising the cost. Top 10 sources of calories in America. As much as I thought I knew about the sources, I was actually surprised myself when I narrowed this list down. Number 1 being grain-based desserts, breads, pizzas. Soda is number 3. Chicken dishes, pasta. Alcohol is number 6. Beef, burgers, dairy, potato chips, tortillas, and then ready-to-eat cereals, which, unfortunately, that's number 10. Calories per food group, the carbohydrates carry 4 calories, proteins also carry 4 calories, and fats carry almost double that. A recommended macronutrient by age group, I believe the first speaker, or Ms. Caplon, pointed the fact how the nutrition was 20%, 30%, up to 50% carbs, and in certain age groups that's still higher than 50%, but we're leaning more towards the 40% carbs and a little higher on the protein and about the same on the fats. And the strongest link between obesity and food is one where just one or more fast foods are consumed every week. The following information is all taken from the dietary guidelines, and dietaryguidelines.gov is where I've gotten my information. That's in the upcoming slides. Again, recommended calories per day. This is a rough estimate. The chart was very consuming, and I didn't want to put that because it would just get jumbled up in numbers. So I averaged out rough numbers because everybody probably wants to look at their age group and go across. So about 1,000 calories for a child, and about 1,400 for an active child. And you can look per age group what the calories are. I summarized that for females because for male age 10 and onwards, you add about 200 to 400 calories per day to the above. You'd add about 200 calories to the sedentary column, add about 400 calories to the active column for a male, given that age. And these are to maintain your weight. at the current weight. For decreasing weight, you want to decrease 500 calories per day for 1 pound weight loss per week. A lot to do for just a pound, but it does add up. Here are the recommendations to increase the types of foods in the fruits and vegetables. The dark green, basically the more colorful your plate, the better. Whole grains, dairy intake of low-fat dairy, and increasing protein, but also increasing protein variety. So I thought that was a very nice way to say not just increasing protein, but increasing protein variety. It doesn't have to come from chicken or meat or fish. It can come even in a vegan diet from tofu, beans, nuts, or a vegetarian diet that includes eggs, or a pescatarian diet that includes fish, or the variety. So as long as there is protein intake, but also a variety of proteins. Here are foods to decrease, quite obvious, but sodium less than 2,000 milligrams per day, and more so less than 1,500 milligrams per day is ideal. Limiting consumption of sugars, refined grains, added fats, such as processed foods, and saturated fats to less than 10% of calories. That's not total fat. Total fat about 20% to 30% for children, and about 20% of total calories from fat for adults. But this is saturated fats to be less than 20%, less than 10%, and the cholesterol to be about less than 300. Get questions about what's trans fatty acids. It's big now, no trans fats. That doesn't always mean that the product is healthy. Maybe it was never going to have any types of fats to begin with. They are found naturally in some foods by grazing animals, thus they're found in small quantities in milk or meats, and that's okay. They are not essential in the diet. They do increase the risk of cardiovascular disease with the increase in trans fatty acid intake. They're formed during processing of some foods, thus increase the shelf life, and thus the recommendations when you go to the grocery store to stay on the outsides of the aisles, because the more central the aisle, the more processed foods there are. But the outsides contain the dairy, the vegetables, the fruit, and the grains. Added sugars, they're naturally in fruit, called fructose, naturally in milk, called lactose. Majority of sugars in typical American diet are added sugars, such as sucrose, and they're most common in high fructose corn syrup solids, raw sugar, malt sugar, maple syrup, pancake syrup, which is not always maple syrup. Most of it is corn syrup unless it says 100% maple syrup. Fructose sweeteners, honey, molasses, dextrose. That's a huge list for added sugars. And the details about juice, the package should say 100% juice. If not, it's likely less than 25% juice and the rest is sugar water. The ingredients from the one brand versus ingredients from another popular brand. You can see the ingredients on the left with the 100% juice are 100% juice with some added calciums. And the juice blend starts with water, sugar. Then you go to the apple and orange juice plus the flavorings. Another one about chocolate milk. I'll give credit at the end of the talk to one of the registered dietitians who helped me with some of this information, and she says she also gets a lot of questions about, well, what about chocolate milk? What she says is, if they're not going to drink milk at all, then low sugar chocolate milk is better, of course, but the child who would have otherwise drank the plain milk, then you want to limit to that. Limit the 100% fruit juice to 8 to 12 ounces per day for children 7 years and older. That's 7 years and older. The younger children are often consuming that or more. 4 ounces of fruit juice equals 1 serving of fruit. But, however, it's without the fiber. So you're not getting the whole grain, but it's still okay because you are getting some. So limiting it is okay. You don't need to avoid it if you don't want to avoid it. And again, a child who would not otherwise drink milk, then lightly added chocolate powder is acceptable. What's the difference in the grains? Whole grain, refined grain, enriched grain. Whole is the entire grain, called a kernel, consumed as a single food, such as wild rice or popcorn. Ingredients in foods, such as cereals, breads, and crackers. The buckwheat, bulgur, millet, oatmeal, quinoa, oats, brown rice, barley, rye, whole wheat, it's nice to see that there's a big variety in the whole grains. And there's more and more of these flours and foods available on the shelf, even in the most, not just whole foods or natural supermarkets, in any grocery stores, majority of them. Then you've got the refined grains, which are the next in line, and they've been milled to remove the outer bran, so they taste a little softer. As Ms. Caplon was saying, that the children weren't accepting the brown, they do taste a little different, but if you get to a whole grain, maybe that's slightly refined, the color can be different, that can be a little more acceptable. They've been milled, like I mentioned, and they result in a finer texture, so that improves shelf life, but of course it does compromise the dietary fiber. Enriched grains are all refined, and they're just added vitamins. This is a nice site, choosemyplate.gov, and it breaks up, an easy way to remember it, just break up the plate into fourths and have a variety of proteins, grains, fruits, and vegetables, with a side order of dairy, which could be a 8-ounce glass of milk or yogurt. I'd like to thank Ms. Parsons for inviting me to speak here, and also to Cheryl Issa, who helped me from Walter Reed Medical Center. She's the pediatric nutritionist there. Here are the resources I use for my talk and something you might like. ChooseMyPlate.gov, EatRight.org, Kids, of course, Real Food for Kids Montgomery, and the guidelines that I used for the talk that were the dietary guidelines from 2010. Be happy to take questions. I want to thank you for your time. In my office, we have multiple offices in Annapolis, Silver Spring, and other locations. But if you'd like any help or consultation, please come find me. I'm about 10 minutes away.
Lisa Lefferts is a senior scientist at the Center for Science in the Public Interest, working primarily on the issue of food additives. She is a member of the FDA Food Advisory Committee and participated in a committee meeting regarding food dyes and hyperactivity in response to a petition from CSPI prior to working there. Previously, she worked on food safety issues, about which she's written a book and many articles, and has worked assessing green label claims on products, and served as the senior editor of Environmental Health News. So please join me in welcoming Lisa.
Is it the top button I press? Okay. Thanks. I'm just delighted to be here. It's really exciting to be in this room on a Saturday morning with all these movers and shakers and people who are really care about this issue. I guess most of you probably know Center for Science in the Public Interest. It's a national consumer advocacy group working on nutrition and food safety issues for the last 40 years or so. And I just learned this morning that CSPI was rated the #1 child nutrition advocacy organization by Philanthropedia. Did I get that right, Jane? Okay. Thank you. And my background is in public health and with an emphasis in toxicology. So we're talking about real and nutritious food, and I'm so glad to be following the previous speaker, because mainly we're talking about nutritious food, but nutritious food has also got to be safe food, and of course food additives is just one part of that. I should mention that, as the previous speaker did, that too much sugar and too much salt is one of the biggest problems, and more important than probably all the other chemical additives in the food supply. So we need to keep that in perspective. That said, there's still a lot we can do when it comes to food additives. So there's about, there are 9 artificial food colors approved by the FDA, and dyes is the first thing I want to talk about. Some of these 9 dyes are no longer used. Most of the dyes that are used these days are those last 3 listed: red 40, yellow 5, and yellow 6. Over 90% of artificial food colors used are those 3. And the lion's share is red 40. And I just want to point out that dyes don't have any very impressive benefits. They're not serving any nutritional function. They're not helping our health. It's mainly a cosmetic function. And in fact, they can often be deceptive because they can fool you into thinking that there's some real food in there, some real colorful fruits and vegetables. And they can displace those colorful fruits and vegetables. Not a lot of benefits, and then there are some risks, and then we'll talk about that. This is just an example of a product called Tropicana Twister Cherry Berry Blast. And if you probably can't see the label, but there's all these little raspberries and cherries dancing around on the label. But when you look on the ingredient list, there are no cherries or berries in there. That's simulated by Red 40. There's only 10% juice in this product. In contrast, this is I thought a beautiful photograph that I stole off of our website. Pictures of healthy school meals across the country. There are even some pictures of healthy school meals here in Montgomery County from Sherwood High School. And this is from a Pinterest website called School Foods Rule that's hosted by Jamie Oliver, the famous chef and TV celebrity. So this is the real food. So artificial food colors are used in a variety of foods. Well, why are they used? In a nutshell, because it's cheaper than using real and nutritious food, and it's also cheaper than using natural colors. I could have also put some school foods here, like strawberry milk or Sidekicks also contain artificial coloring. And I also added some sodas that have caramel coloring, and there's some concerns with that kind of coloring as well. Dyes have increased. This is based on FDA data. The amounts certified have increased fivefold between 1955 and 2010. So the idea that food dyes might have an impact on behavior has been around since the 70s when Dr. Feingold, who you might have heard of, the Feingold diet or the Feingold hypothesis, first put forward the notion that food dyes might be affecting the behavior of children. And it wasn't until 2010 that the FDA finally conceded that yes, for certain susceptible children, that the data suggests that their condition may be exacerbated by exposure to artificial food colors. Similarly, this is another FDA statement that exposure to artificial food colors may be associated with adverse behaviors, not necessarily related to hyperactivity in certain kids. We're not just talking about kids with ADHD, but we are talking about those kids, kids with other problem behaviors, and even susceptible children from the general population. So we are potentially talking about a lot of kids. And I think it's important to remember that not all kids are susceptible to dyes, but they do have the potential to disrupt the classroom. So this is advice that the British government puts out. They say that if a child shows signs of hyperactivity or ADHD, eliminating the colors considered in the Southampton study from their diet might have some beneficial effects on their behavior. What's the Southampton study? That was a study done at the University of Southampton in the UK, which found increased levels of hyperactivity in young children consuming mixtures of artificial food colors and a preservative, sodium benzoate. They were looking at 3-year-old and 8-year-old children in the general population. These children were not selected because they were hyperactive or had ADHD. And this study was published in The Lancet, which is one of the most prestigious medical journals. We don't know how many kids might be affected by dyes, and most kids are not affected, but it's plausible that hundreds of thousands of school-age children may be at risk from adverse effects of dyes. And dyes contribute a modest but entirely preventable cost to the enormous costs to society of ADHD, which is estimated to be between 36 billion and 52.4 billion, which is assuming a rather modest prevalence. The prevalence is probably more than that. One estimate is that 8% of children with ADHD have symptoms related to food dyes. So in Europe, they require that any foods that contain any of those artificial colors that were studied in that British study, they have to be labeled with a warning label that says, may have an adverse effect on activity and attention in children. So this label requirement has resulted in a de facto ban in those food colors. Now they use slightly different, or they were using slightly different food colors in Europe than here, but those colors include those three that make up over 90% of the dyes that we use, which is yellow 5, yellow 6, and red 40. So I just want to very briefly mention some other risks that are associated with artificial dyes. The FDA determined that red 3 caused cancer, specifically thyroid tumors in laboratory animals, and it was banned for a number of uses, but it's still allowed in food. Some of the other dyes contain contaminants that have been listed by the government as either known to be a human carcinogen or reasonably anticipated to be a human carcinogen. Caramel coloring, when it's produced using ammonia, which is the kind of caramel coloring found in Coke and Pepsi, contains a contaminant called 4-methylimidazole. You can call it 4-MI. And the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer considers that to be possibly carcinogenic to humans. The state of California listed this chemical as a chemical known to the state to cause cancer. So the Coke and Pepsi sold in California has very low levels of this contaminant. And there was a study not too long ago looking at Coke and Pepsi sold elsewhere, and it found that Coke levels had, the levels were very low in Coke, but not in Pepsi. So Pepsi says they're working on it, but, and who knows what the situation is in other countries. And I also just want to mention allergic reactions. Some children and adults have allergic reactions to certain food dyes. For example, yellow 5, some people who are allergic to aspirin are also allergic to yellow 5. And it's not just synthetic dyes. In fact, annatto, which comes from a seed from a tropical shrub, may cause more allergic reactions than the synthetic dyes. So what's the solution? CSBI thinks that dyes that cause cancer and adverse behavioral impacts should be banned. FDA has not acted on CSBI's petition requesting that. Another approach would be to require a warning notice for dyes that impact behavior, like what's done in Europe. We think that there should be disclosure of any added coloring on the front label. So it's a little bit of a tip-off that, number one, there's dyes in it, and maybe there's not some of that real fruits and vegetables that you think are in there. Finally, one can press companies not to use artificial food colors. And I don't know if anybody saw the news yesterday. Apparently Kraft has decided not to allow artificial food colorings in 3 of its macaroni and cheese products. Still would be in the main one, but that's progress. And a mother from New York named Renee Shutters has started a petition, and CSBI has partnered with her on that petition. Her son was, she believes, very much affected by dyes. When they removed dyes from his diet, they said he was like a different kid. The teachers and coaches agreed. And that petition has gone viral. It got over 100,000 signatures in just over 2 weeks. And if you're interested in signing it, it urges Mars, who's the maker of M&Ms, to stop using artificial food colors in the M&Ms that are sold to kids in the United States. They already do that in Europe, so why can't they do it here? Kraft does that in Europe. They don't have those artificial dyes. If you go to McDonald's in England and you get a strawberry sundae, there's no artificial color in it. But if you go to McDonald's here in this country, there is. So clearly these companies can produce these products without putting these worrisome dyes in there, and they need some pressure to be able to be convinced to do that. I'd like to talk a little bit about caffeine. Caffeine is the only drug that is added to widely consumed foods. It's actually, there's only 2 drugs that are added to foods, quinine and caffeine. So the question is, should a mildly addictive stimulant drug be permitted at school? Maybe you don't think of it that way because so many of us are used to having our morning cup of coffee. FDA states that caffeine is a central nervous system stimulant, and some studies show that caffeine causes a physical dependence or addiction. The American Academy of Pediatrics, after rigorous review and analysis, concluded that caffeine and other stimulant substances contained in energy drinks have no place in the diet of children and adolescents. The Institute of Medicine, in their nutrition standards for foods in schools, came to a very similar conclusion about caffeine, that caffeine in significant quantities has no place in foods and beverages offered in schools. They weren't talking about naturally occurring low levels of caffeine. However, as many of you probably know, the USDA in their interim final rule on competitive foods is saying that caffeine can be used, can be sold in products in the high school. But several states don't allow caffeinated beverages in schools, and they find plenty of other healthful things to serve that the children will drink. One of the reasons I'm bringing up caffeine is because the situation with caffeine is really changing. Most of us think of coffee, tea, cocoa, soda. And of course, caffeine has also been found for many years in a number of things, a number of medications, like headache remedies and cough and cold medications, now even weight reduction products. But these days, there is an explosion of caffeinated products on the marketplace. You can find caffeine in just about anything these days: chips, popcorn, waffles, pancake syrup, trail mix. It's just being added to so many different foods and beverages, bottled water that contains caffeine, and of course, energy drinks. And if food's not enough for you, you can now get it in your shampoo or a spray or patches, lotions, lip balm. It's just proliferating. I went to an Institute of Medicine workshop recently. There's a lot of reasons why this is happening, and I don't have time to go into it, but the short answer is this is happening because it makes people buy the products more, or at least the companies believe that, and they do have some data to support that notion. So, FDA has stated that the proliferation of these products in the marketplace is very disturbing to us. This is the Deputy Commissioner of FDA, Michael Taylor. And they've said, oh wow, I gotta speed this up, that their concern is about caffeine appearing in a range of new products, and they're concerned about the cumulative impact. I'm gonna race over these slides, but there has been a 13-fold increase in emergency room visits due to energy drinks, according to this government agency. Sorry, in the last, between 2005 and 2011. And even caffeine in traditional sources is changing. You know, I was looking at an FDA brochure from 2007 that said, you know, how much caffeine is in coffee? 100 milligrams for a 5-ounce cup. But when you go to Starbucks, you know, you can't get a 5-ounce cup of coffee. You can get a 16-ounce cup of coffee or a 20-ounce cup of coffee that has 3 or 4 times that amount of caffeine. And this is a table that you can get from our website that lists caffeine content, because caffeine content is not required to be on the label, so you don't know. So how are you supposed to monitor how much you or your kid is getting? And according to the DSM, which is like the American Psychological Association's Bible on diagnosing different disorders, you can get caffeine intoxication with a low dose, For example, 200 milligrams, they say, in vulnerable individuals such as children and individuals who have not been exposed to caffeine previously. That's why a lot of us think of caffeine as no big deal because we're used to drinking it, but for someone who has never had it, it is a stimulant, it is a drug, it is a new substance, and it can cause real problems. The FDA official limit for caffeine in soda is 71 milligrams per 12-ounce serving. Coffee has a lot more than that, especially these large coffees. And there's a Canadian recommended limit for kids as well. So we don't think caffeine is appropriate for consumption by children and adolescents. That would include in the high school. And we think it should be listed on the label so people can figure out how much caffeine they're being exposed to. And we think that FDA really needs to act to limit the proliferation of caffeine-added products in the marketplace, which parents, kids, schools have no experience with these kinds of products. Very quickly, I'm just going to run over a few other additives. BHA is a preservative that, according to the government, in their official report on carcinogens, the latest edition, lists as reasonably anticipated to be a human carcinogen. What's it doing in the food supply? There are some other flavoring agents that are also listed in that official report. That report draws on data from a number of sources, including government sources like the National Toxicology Program, which very recently found clear evidence of carcinogenic activity, that's cancer activity, for aloe vera when it's ingested, not when you put it on your skin, and ginkgo biloba. So we don't think that kids ought to be exposed to carcinogens in the food supply. And as I mentioned earlier, FDA concluded that Red 3 causes cancer in rats and therefore terminated some of the listings, but you can still find it in fruit roll-ups and baked goods, etc. I've personally done a lot of work on aspartame, and this is a whole other huge subject, but aspartame caused cancer in 3 independent studies at multiple sites in the body. And when aspartame was approved, FDA was looking at industry-sponsored studies, which were not nearly as powerful. They weren't as large, they weren't as well-designed in terms of being able to detect a cancer effect. So we feel that these more recent independent studies are much more reliable. They've been widely criticized, as you might expect, and we have looked carefully at those criticisms and found them to be largely without merit. I don't have time to go over other additives, but if you're curious to know what CSBI's take is on different additives, we list additives as either safe, and most of them are safe, individually, although they tend to be often used in foods that aren't so great, that are processed. But you can find out our ratings, whether they're safe, avoid, cut back, etc., at this website or get our mobile app. That's it. Thank you.
We've heard the argument that if children are eating dyes in their foods at home or after school or, essentially, or in their lunch boxes for that matter, that what difference would it make if we took the dyes out of the school food? How would you answer that?
Gosh. Oh, is this on? Can you hear me? Okay. Well, first off, I don't think we have good data on how much dyes, but kind of makes sense that the more dyes, the worse. For another thing, I do think there is the potential to disrupt other children in the population. I mean, it's one thing if a parent decides that they want to give their kids these foods, but for a kid that exhibits hyperactive behavior, that is disruptive for the entire classroom. And I really think that we don't need to do that even for the children that are not susceptible to dyes.
Is this one still on? Okay. And then I had a question too for Shivani. What would be the top 2 or 3 things that you would recommend to change about school food to make it healthier?
I think what Ms. Caplon was talking about, that go back and get, 2 more things. One thing I wasn't clear on, whether that was a recommendation only for the completely free or for everybody. So I think if we make that a requirement, that everybody has to have those on their servings, and then the lunch monitors, make sure children are helping to eat those. I know there's a lot to do during the lunch monitoring sessions, but that would be, appetizing. And again, in a way, sneaking in foods that are healthy, the whole grain that looks like white bread, those kind of, and no fried foods.
We have a question in the audience.
Singer, I'm asking you the question about NutraSweet, because the original studies was done with the original form in NutraSweet. The current NutraSweet on the market is genetically modified. Would that cause for the increase in carcinogen level?
Would that what? Could you repeat the last part of your question?
The current NutraSweet is genetically modified. So is that the cause for the increase in carcinogen activity versus what was developed in the 70s?
I really don't know anything about that. I doubt it. I don't know.
I've seen more neurologic issues with NutraSweet now than when it was out in the 70s.
It's possible. I don't know, but simply looking at the size of the studies, the industry studies don't meet current standards for how large a study should be, and the independent studies I'm referring to far exceed those standards. So on that basis alone, I think that would be sufficient to explain the differences. For example, there were some rare kidney tumors observed in the independent animal studies. You'd never, ever have a hope of finding those in these little teeny weeny studies. And I'm talking about animal studies. There were these 3 animal studies, but there's also there was a epidemiological study, in people that found one of the same, the main tumor type found in the animal studies. They found just a very whisper of that. It was very marginal, but it does add a little bit of weight to the animal studies.
If I may add something quickly, I do see anecdotally in my patients who, because of diabetes, are consuming, the artificial sweeteners. And after a while, even a high volume of those can cause problems, such as headaches with the neurological issues you mentioned, as well as GI, stomach upsets. So after a while, because of weight, that I know they're consuming not just artificial sugars, but a lot of those, maybe 10 packets of Sweet and Low or Splenda a day, and non-sugared cookies, to excess, that once they stop or eliminate that from their diet, the artificial sweeteners, their headaches or their bowel problems do disappear for some people. So that is at least anecdotal. We do see that.
And in fact, there are 2, I believe it's 2 studies, controlled studies that did find, that tested people that reported headaches. Some studies haven't found it, but there are some controlled studies that have verified, yes, headaches can occur in certain people on aspartame.
Seems to me we're fighting an uphill battle. It's fairly well established now that children will want to eat what they've been brought up eating at home. So without parent education very, very early, parents who are used to buying and serving sodas, processed drinks, sugary snacks, etc., will keep on introducing those and feeding them to their children. The children will get bad food habits before they even get to school. What can be done about parent nutrition education?
That's fantastic. And I think what we're doing right now, I think that's the big thing. You can see most of the population here as adults. There's a few children, and I'm sure of the people here, a lot must be parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles. So starting grassroots organizations like this and advertisement and just getting involved locally will help. I see a lot more of this, and we all do, than we did 10, 20 years ago. The thing about don't drink soda at the dinner table was something you just didn't do if you didn't do it, but you didn't hear about not doing it. But now you hear about not doing that. So that information is targeted for parents who are bringing soda to the dinner table, etc. So just more word of mouth and encouraging people, and it has to do with the culture where at certain birthday parties. My son had we did my son's birthday party last year, and we did have pizza, but we had actually some vegetarian sushi, and we had fruit. So I remember it was at a swim club, and the girl who was organizing the swim club, she said, "Oh, I've never seen fruit brought to the birthday party before." She said, "That's the first time I've seen that," and they've been doing these parties for over a decade. So, maybe just encouraging, and other parents who come, they said, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea." So the next party I went to, they also had fruit. So I thought that was nice.
Question from an elementary student here.
I had I have a question, how can we make this happen? But many of the students that are buying lunch, they get their snacks and sweets, and then they just pass down the vegetables and they eat the sweets. And I think they should make a rule that they have to get vegetables and stuff first, and then go out and eat that, and then come back and get the snacks afterwards.
So Elizabeth would like to know how we could make that happen.
I'm sorry?
She would like to know how we could make her idea happen.
How we could make her idea happen. I'm not sure if everybody heard us all. It sounded like she was suggesting that the students should be sent forward to have their vegetables and fruit and eat it, which is in fact what we suggest for our healthy party plan, is serve some fruits and vegetables first, then let them get their little treat. So that's one of the things that we're working on the individual school level. I'm afraid we're only going to be able to take one more question, but you can speak with these speakers during lunch and ask them your questions personally, so go ahead.
This is more of an issue that I would like to raise as a kindergarten teacher in MCPS, because nobody's talked about it, and yet it connects with all the things that we would like to see happening, including the question from the elementary school student. We are not talking about time as an issue in helping children to get a healthy balance of eating the right foods and exercising and having brains that are ready to learn. In my kindergarten class, our lunchtime, and we just introduced the Maryland Meals for Achievement breakfast program, so the kids finish eating breakfast at 9, and then our lunchtime is at 10:45. At 10:45, they are herded, and I really mean herded, with 110 other kindergartners into the lunchroom, where if it's a high popularity pizza day, all the kids who are buying pizza, and on that day it will be the farm's kids as well as many of the other children who would ordinarily bring lunch, wait in line for up to 20 minutes and finally sit down with their trays at 10:10, at 11:10. At 11:15, the lunch aides do their very best to help all those 5-year-olds clean up at the same time and rush them outside. Now, if you're a 5-year-old and you know that your recess is starting and you have all this food on your plate and it's hard to open the container and it's difficult to eat a fresh apple because you have to bite it and chew it, you end up with a situation where children don't have enough time to eat a proper relaxed lunch, they don't have enough time to run it off at recess, and then they come back into my classroom where I attempt to stuff a large amount of curriculum down their overstuffed throats. And so this issue of time is really, really important, and as we look at the possibility of changing bell times and extending the elementary school day by half an hour, I would like to encourage all of you who care about children and their health and their growth and their learning to say to your schools, to say to your representatives of whatever organizations you belong to, in elementary school, if we get an extra half an hour, there is no more curriculum to fit in there. What we should fit into that extra half an hour is more time to eat and more time to play.
Thank you both.